Welcome back to another hooded nib installment, and we have in front of you not one but two Eversharp Fifth Avenues. This is the one I showed you before, but as I kind of pre-disassembled it to make sure everything looked good, this little guy tumbled out, so we have a defective filling mechanism. So couldn't proceed with that without like going through other pens trying to salvage one of these. So just to save time and the hassle of trying to dig through stuff real quick, I pulled another one. This is a full-sized model, which this is, I mean, my light's not amazing in this room, but shining a light. This is a nice rich deep red, and this is a kind of a dark brown, similar-ish, but man, I really wish I could work on this one because this is like such a nice deep red. But bigger pen means probably easier to handle, right? Maybe, I don't know. So let's go ahead and get this guy taken apart, and easy enough, pop the cap. This is a nice gold filled cap that we'll kind of look at a little bit later. I kind of like the style of this, and I do like this cap. We have our hood, and all we have to do is unthread the body. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. We have a breather tube. Looks like no sack, so this has been messed with before, but we have a nice long breather tube. We have this little catch ring right here, and we have our classic hood with these threads and the feed within. And I'm trying to look at it just to see, because I've never actually considered before, but is it all one milled piece? I think so. It's not like it's a threaded connector within a hood. I think this is all one piece, so nothing special. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find, what did I do with them? Just had them, I think, right there. I'll give it a couple taps. If it doesn't work, I'm going to go ahead and do the usual soak, 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 see if it unloosens, not unloosens, but loosens anything. But let's give it a tap. Did that do anything? Maybe. I'm going to give it another one. Nope, not really. So just like all the rest, it's going to take a little bit of soaking. We'll see what I can do to knock it out a little bit more, and maybe use a little bit of heat, but we'll come back to that one. And all we have left is this guy. And guess what? This is true to form for Eversharps since the Skyline and on. To get the filling mechanism out, I mean, you can. I looked inside this one. It's intact. It's not a J-bar, so it's the other variety. So I'm going to lift up, do a little padding down here, press down and out, and we're going to slide it out. So then we just have to grab little alligator pliers, and we're going to look inside, grab it, and just pull it on out, and let's just take a look at it. Looks like the little, let's get this out. The little ring that keeps it in place looks nice and shiny, no corrosion, looks solid. The lever itself looks good. And if we take a look at the bar itself, a little bit of something, could use a little bit of cleaning. Up top, down below, looks like there's a little bit of developing rust corrosion. So I think if we go ahead and address this, we'll have a pretty good serviceable lever bar or lever apparatus here. So I think we're catching this at a good time to kind of make an intervention and keep this thing good. So if we can sand that down, clean it up, maybe put a little bit of protective coating, a little, you know, Renaissance wax at least for this to kind of protect it and put a film on it, I think we'd be in good stead. So there's that. I'm going to keep that as a unit for now, but I will take it apart. And so all that's really left, I guess you could think about can we do anything to the cap? And I don't know too much about caps. Caps are one of those things where, to me, it's kind of tricky getting into them. But it looks like this does have, like a clutch system, just like the Parker 51 does. Because there's a little bulgy arm, a space, another bulgy arm. Hope you can see this. Yeah, see that kind of alternating pattern? It looks like the inside of a Parker 51 cap, like this clutch ring that kind of just bulges out ever so slightly and catches that little ring just enough to catch that. And I have a little tool that takes them out of the Parker 51. I honestly don't know if it's going to translate to this, because I also in here I see a cap liner, so I don't think so. I don't think I can really do much without special tools that I don't have. But that little lip, I'm abutting like the cap liner at that point. This is a little extra something, and I don't know that they are connected to this little clutch ring. So without any expertise, I'm going to just clean the inside of this. There is a little springy mechanism beyond that little, is that springy, or is that just, actually no, that's not springy, is it? That's just bolted in. So I take that back. Just bolted in up here, little cap liner with a clutch system to catch this ring. But I'm not sophisticated enough to know what to do with that, so I'm going to leave it alone, do my polishing. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to polish up. And this one is, let me just kind of look at it in the light. Yeah, it's got some usual wear. This was somebody's use. Somebody used this for a little bit. This other one looks a lot, it's got a little bit of something, but it's a lot smoother. This really was, I think this is new old stock NOS. Oh, and there you can see a little bit of that red. So this one I don't think was ever really touched, so that's beautiful. But definitely you can tell a little bit of a difference between just maybe a little handling versus a little bit of daily use, because it does have little micro scratches and just a little more dullness overall. But the thing I do like about Eversharps after the Skyline and beyond, is there aren't any, like typically, and I'm going to double check to make sure I'm not wrong, there aren't any barrel imprints. So once you get the lever out, cover this, you can just really polish it. And that's what I really love about these Eversharps. You know, they've got a great stylized kind of logo system, but they're freed up from the barrel, and so me as a refurbisher, restorer, can just really polish and make something look really good. So I do value that. This might be a little bit more difficult. I might take some micro mesh just to kind of do this little area and this little smooth area, but it's going to just be finicky, and just me doing a little bit of like touching, trying not to get onto this little rib, because I don't want to dull it or do anything. So I'll see what I can do by hand, but it'll be a light hand, and I'll probably rely more on my polishes for this little bit of a section. And then of course we'll come back, kind of show everything, how they shined up. I'll show you the nib and everything just to see if there's anything special about it. And at that point it'll be polished, we can put it back together, and we'll kind of do our writing sample. So I think this one will be a short one. I'll see you in a few, maybe later today, but I'll see you in a bit, and we'll see how it polishes up and put it back together. All right, welcome back. So that was a knuckle pop, but we have a little bit more to tell you this time. I was able to read and figure out a little bit more about the Eversharp and this Fifth Avenue, how to take it apart. So let me go ahead and focus on this hood section. So I don't think I was able to show you before, but there was a little piece, I may have pointed it out, I don't remember, but that was like kind of popping up and down, and you could, I may have called it a collar, or at least in my head I've been calling it a collar, but this is something that I kind of saw pop in. So I looked to see, like, does this hood come apart? Is there more that I can do? And actually this is called the sheath for the Fifth Symphony, or the Fifth Avenue. And I do believe this is one solid piece. It does not unscrew, does not come out, but this is all just kind of machined to be the hood and its threaded part. But what I was finding was in some later models, and I think this is probably one of the later ones, there is a bushing, a black and hard rubber bushing that acts as a collar for both the feed and the nib. So they fit in there, get securely put in, and then this slips down the front and rests in here and just kind of keeps everything in place and friction fit within the sheath itself. And so I was watching this thing bob up and down, and that's what got me to figure out that, oh, you can indeed actually knock these out. And this one is actually really difficult. Like, it was just kind of stuck there. So I wound up taking my metal dowel and sliding it in there, and it was, you know, butting up against that. And so I just kind of held it in my hand because I don't have anything, a knockout block is going to mess this thing up. So I really just held it in my hand and kind of knocked until it finally just pushed it out. And I have another book, it's a pen repair manual, that actually talked about having some kind of tool that, you know, if this were all assembled, you'd be able to stick it up through here, and it catches these two grooves at the bottom here, and apparently you can help like catch it, turn, and push it out. So there is a special tool that you can use to push this out, but again, if you have something that fits around the whole thing and is able to push it out, you should be able to pop it out yourself. And the repair manual said that maybe if this doesn't come out, you know, you could knock the nib and feed out, and this being in here, you can push everything back in. But when I was dry running, then doing this so I could make sure I could do it for the camera and figure out, you know, am I gonna mess it up? Do I need any special tools? It was super hard. I could not get this nib and feed to kind of go as deep as I needed to, because I just could not get enough finger purchase to be able to push this small feed and nib into this collar and push that down. So it was really like hard to do, and that's why I kind of pushed forward to see hell or high water. I mean, I can't get the nib in properly, so I might as well try and just pop out this little collar, and luckily I was able to. So this is a very brittle piece. I think I'm getting very lucky with the things that I'm doing right now. And I was actually just kind of comparing it to another one, a black one that I have, and this is kind of what they look like. As I've kind of messed with it a little bit, but it really did just easily fit right in and out. So when I knocked this one out, the whole thing came out as a unit. So that's kind of what I was toying around with over the past couple of days. So let me show you what we have in terms of this, because this is about to go back in the hood, and you know, we're never going to see it again. But if I zoom in, try to show you something on it, it's going to be so small, it's going to be hard. But just under that breather hole, it just says Eversharp, and then there's a 14, maybe 14K. I looked under the loop so I could tell you, but already forgot what it said. But it says 14K, USA, maybe made in USA, and there's a patent. So very simple. And if we do note that this does have kind of a little bit of an upward flare to it, and that is kind of what these Eversharp nibs do, or the Fifth Avenue nibs do. And then, you know, I kind of pre-aligned it, so after I do all this putting together, I'll have to recheck, but it aligned pretty well. So it's definitely gonna be a fine nib though. And now the focus is freaking out, so let me zoom out and show you one other thing that I think, this is not brown, this is red. When it polished up, it actually looked more red, and I think it's, you know, without getting in a good glare and a good light, it's actually hard to see. This is such a dark color that I just thought it was brown compared to this other one. And you know, you can get in some light, oh, no, that looks darn near black. So maybe not the best red color choice for these pens, because it's really making me decide whether it's brown or red, but I think I can firmly say now it's red. And even the hood almost looks like a different color. Like, it's just so dark, it's really difficult. I think I have to take this outside. There we go, looks a little reddish. Outside in some good natural light to really see this thing kind of show off its true color. So maybe when I upload this and I choose the thumbnail for YouTube, I'll see if I can get an outside light, because here's the black one. Yeah, definitely not black. It just looks, it's just so hard to tell on these indoor lights. But anyway, I thought I would mention that. And what else? This little cap here, a little bit of a jiggle, and I took my long light to look in there. So I feel that these are probably glued on, so no screw in here. So if this comes off, just kind of put some glue on it. It'll probably hold it steady. And let me show you how we did with this. This is the filler, and I just took the wire brush from my Dremel tool and ran it over it and just got some of that beginning corrosion off. Put a little Renaissance wax on it just to see if I can help protect it over time. But there we go, cleaned up lever bar. Let me try something since we're kind of putting it together. See if I can get this together a little bit. And I may have to do some of it off camera. And I am going to use a special tool to be able to seat things correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and put the feed into the nib. I'm going to ride it fairly high. I'm going to put it into the collar, and on my particular one the little notches are down, so that just sits at the top. And I'm going to use the table. I'm just going to press this down in, and I should get it pretty much close down to the bottom. I think I have a little bit more to go, and that's kind of a long feed being exposed. So, and this is where I might just take it off camera, use some heat so that everything's expanded. I don't have to use a lot of force, but let me take a pause, heat, push this down as far as I think I can get it, and then I'll show you what I'm about to do next. And there it is. I was able to get a little bit more of a push down. If you look in the back, it's got a little bit of space, and I may have to play around with this to find out the right depth, but we'll start there and just kind of see what we have. And so here's what we're going to do. If I can, there we go, found my hood. And what we're going to do is find a place, because that's going to slip in the end there, and I'm going to try to turn it as best I can and start working that collar down, the bushing down. This is my setting, and so that we can line up this peak of the hood, the sheath, with the tip of that nib. And I think that looks pretty good. Ouch, stuck my finger on the tip on that peak. I'm going to take a look with the loop just to double check myself, and we'll come right back and I'll show you the way that I'm going to cheat. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to get perfect, but I think for now that's going to be pretty good. So I'll show you the part that kind of is tripping me up. Because it's so tight and it doesn't just want to slip in and seat itself, I can only go so far with my pushing, because it's going to get to the point where all I really have access to with my fingers is kind of this, which I can't put enough pressure on, and I can't grip the nib enough to kind of push the rest of it down. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I guess it's not cheating if it's a tool that I have. I'm going to take this little Schaefer tool. I may have shown it, but it's really just a hollow tube that fits over a breather tube that you can use to preserve the breather tube in these Schaefer sections and feeds to be able to knock out the nib feed with the breather tube. Otherwise, they're a high risk of breaking. So it really just kind of like goes over, and you can use it as a knockout. But it happens to be the right size. I'm going to slip it over the end. Yep, so slip it over the end, nib and feed, and just walk it straight down. And it's going to rest itself on that collar. It just happens to be the right diameter. And I'm just going to push down. I'll do it this way to kind of get that collar to move down. I'm going to check it, see what it did. So it's down, and it's actually pretty good. Yeah, like I said, I'm probably not exactly middle, and I might play around with it off camera, but this is the gist. This is the idea of getting that settled down, and that's actually not terrible. Yeah. And it kind of looks in the profile, it's kind of set way down in there. You got that peaking just beyond the peak. So I'm gonna call that good. And now my battery's about to die, so I'm gonna stop here, switch the battery, and come back. Okay, switch the battery, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you. I redid it just to clean it up, polish the tips and make things look a little bit better. But I kind of redid it just to kind of get a little bit more practice, and I think it looks a lot better. I let it peek out just a little bit more. I'm gonna kind of take that black hood, and much easier, again, like since this one easily slipped out, I put the nib feed back in, slid it back, and I was able to press it nicely, friction fit, and it naturally comes to something similar. So I think this bit is a little bit better than what I had before. So I think that's a good set depth. And the feeds are a little bit different. This one seems to have more of a rounded dome compared to this guy that has more of a classic flat. So a little bit of a difference in perspective, but overall I think I'm happy with the way that looks. It does look like a nice kind of peeking out nib that's hooded, so I think we did well. So let me come on back and we will tackle the rest of it, and I'll see if we can do this part fairly quickly. And I will have my Q-tip alligator forceps, and we're going to see if we can do it with one try, because I think I found another little technique to get these back in. So I'm going to take the lever assembly with my alligator forceps and that little ring hanging down. I'm going to come and slide it lined up with the lever hole, the lever socket, hole, whatever you want to call it, and just kind of push it back. And what I was finding, go ahead and use my toothpick, and maybe if I'm lucky, actually here's what I was finding, that this guy was a little bit more, when delayed deeper, harder to get my toothpick under. So I'll lift him up a little bit. Do my alligator right there, keep it from going all the way back down. And slide him in, same thing. And let me see if I can do it once on camera, because I think the technique was letting me do it a little bit more successfully than I had with the Skyline, when I was just like kind of doing the way I've always done it. There we go. Let's get the lever up. And so what I'm doing is I kind of, as I slide it, I'm giving a little bit of a twist, like side to side, and that caught that groove a lot better than me just trying to grab this and move it up and down. And that was a much better technique, just kind of relying on the forceps rather than the lever. Although it works both ways, I think this is like very just randomly dependent on getting a little more lucky than using the alligator. Brilliant. So I think fantastic. So let's do a little bit more, and go ahead and put that ring on just so I don't lose track of it. And let's go ahead and put the sack. So this is a size 16 sack. You can probably downsize to 15, be a little bit more tight on the nipple, but this is such a ginormous barrel that the good thing is I can slide that on. I don't have to cut that sack down at all. This is humongous. And let's see if, oops, oh. And this might be the reason to go down to a 15, just to give yourself a little bit more space, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal overall. Let me do that and just show you how much space that barrel has for this guy. But there, and it really doesn't even quite reach the bottom, so I'm not going to cut this at all. But what I'm going to do is take my breather tube. I'm going to find, there's usually one side that has a little bit of a taper because it's been in the breather tube hole of the feed, so The one with the taper is generally the one I start with. And they can be kind of annoying to find the hole and line it up. So if it's not going, I'll switch the other side, just see. Come on. There we go. I was wrong. Fits right in. Okay. So I've got my shellac. Ooh. Starting to get gummed up. I'm going to do the usual. All around that nipple. Slide that up and over. And just slide it on. Give it a twist. Anything that comes out, I'm going to push it back in. And I'm just going to let that be for a second. Yeah, that's humongous. And let's find the talc. And I like to put the bottom in some and just work it up. Do that a couple times just to get a decent coating. And that should be more than enough. And we'll slide that on. The talc will hopefully keep the tighter fit from catching and twisting the sack, which it seems to be doing okay. And tighten it down. And unfortunately, the thing I found about these Fifth Avenues is the threading is not ideal. It's going to catch, and the lever is going to be wherever the heck it wants to be. It doesn't line up nicely with the top of the nib and feed. And there's ways you can play around with that, but sometimes I found them where they just kind of line up nicely. How'd this one do? Yeah, see, even this one. Way off. It's usually on the bottom, which is annoying to me, but I guess it doesn't really matter. It's just aesthetic, and for some reason I like it. And let's see what the black one does, because I thought one of these lined up well, just almost on accident. Maybe not. Oh well, they're all about the same. But there we go. That is our fully put together Fifth Avenue, and we'll pop the cap on. And I'll go ahead and wipe it down, do some learning, we'll come back, we'll use it, and we'll talk about it. So thanks for this, probably a little bit longer because of the nitpicky things, but we'll get moving with the next part. Okay, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks actually. I was a little bit negligent about doing this particular video, so I finally made the time, and let's go ahead and show it off a little bit and do some talking. And since I kind of showed it off in the other sections of the video, I might not show as much, but just for the sake of having seen it in its full polished glory, let's go ahead and show a little bit of this, and I'll just go ahead and comment on the design at this part. So this is supposed to be like a more Art Deco-ish design with the kind of recalling a cylindrical, well-balanced, kind of minimally ornate kind of pen. You know, you've got your rounded edges and you've got your rectangular curved edges. So still harkening back to Art Deco, which seems to be a little bit of a step back from the Skyline, which this is after, but was much more modern than this kind of pen. But if we take a look at the clip, we have this nice little V'd groove through the clip, and we have our classic Eversharp double check. And I'm pretty sure, I keep going back and forth if this is a bolted in clip or not, and I forgot to double check in my readings, but keep doing this. I think it's bolted in. I really don't see that flexing too much, so I'm going to say bolted in. If anybody knows otherwise, let me know. There is on the top, I don't think I showed this, oh, that is zoomed in. It does say Eversharp up here at the top, all the way around. little something down here at the bottom too, which I don't have my loop handy, so I'm going to assume that's probably where it tells you that it's whatever tenth or whatever fraction gold filled, because this is a silver cap with gold overlay. So there is that bit of it. And what else do we have? But we have the long barrel, we have the nice kind of classic Eversharp clip, we have our I was going to call it a thimble. I don't know why I keep zooming in and out, but again, continuing that kind of brood vermeil kind of pattern, and then a little domed in cap, and this of course is domed in, so very symmetric, very classic, and I like that about this pen. It's a little bit different than the pens of the time. It's harkening a little bit more retro, but I think it's still kind of a cool 1940s deco, maybe even crossing into mid-century kind of design. So I think it's probably straddling, even though what I see online is saying more Art Deco. And if we pop off the cap, which I'll say it's pretty tight, that takes a bit of effort, so it's definitely a solid, and pops off. It does pop off satisfyingly with the click. And we have the little cap catch here. That's my word for these things. We have our hood with the two faceted things at the top, which lines up with the top of the nib, so that's what lets you know you're holding upright. When you see the facets, it's upright, and you can just go ahead and write. And then we have it rounded at the bottom, a little rounded nosed feed, and I'll go ahead and call this one a hooded nib. I mean, it sticks out a little bit more, but I don't know if that's enough to call it semi-hooded, but I'm going to go with that. And otherwise, clean barrel, and I know the light in here is a little bit darker today, even though it's the same lights. It's just not showing as well as before because it's later in the day, but this is a red, kind of deep red pen. And let's go ahead and see what we have. I have my notes beside me, and we can just kind of go ahead and jump into the writing, and I'll kind of tell you what I learned. There's only really probably a couple good sources for Fifth Avenues, because they're not a super popular pen, but I hope to change it because I love this pen for some reason. So dip it, and we'll see if we listen. I'm going to do it several times because there is the breather. It's got the magic feed, is what Eversharp called it, to kind of optimize their filling, the magic feed system. And did I put my notes on top of it? Ah, there it is. I have my little paper towel. This washable paper towel, in case you're wondering. And let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm going to uncover my notes. So let's go ahead and see if this picks up, and I'll zoom in to see if we can minimize the out of focusness of it. Alright. Picks up right away, and that is a very fine line. Wow. Okay. So, uh-oh. Eversharp. I wonder, actually. There we go. I'm having to press on it. I might actually have to shim this a little bit. Let's see if it opens up, because it's better if I put some pressure. Okay. I'm going to hold some pressure to open those tines up. Okay. Let's see what we do. I'm going to do it this way. Avenue. A little bit better. Okay. So I had a little bit of a tight tine situation, which I might work on after the video. But here we go. Eversharp Fifth Avenue. Came out, I saw a couple date ranges, and on the Richard Binder site, I'm going to go ahead and stick with what he has. But he has 1943 as the beginning year and a couple other places I saw 1945, but with Richard Binder saying 1943, I'm going to go with 1943. And, you know, as we know, anything that you're going to say in the 1940s and hooded nib is competing with the Parker 51, right? So this was their contribution to the hooded nibs. And it's interesting because there are two designers on this pen. There's the designer for the hood. I think I've been calling it the sheath. I've also seen it called the shell. And then there's also the barrel / cap part. So if we go with the original designer, and I'll caveat this in a second, but the original designer of the barrel itself was Raymond. Now I'm going to really mention these names because he's going to pop back up in a future video. And I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to say Loewy. I'm going to say Loewy. Right, so he designed the overall general aesthetic. And there was apparently a prototype that had an open nib. So this is going to be an almost different pen up here. Not almost, it was going to be a different pen, a more traditional kind of front section until the Parker 51 came along. Then they felt like, uh-oh, we've got this pen, there's something hooded, people love it, they're buying it like crazy. So they had another guy, and this is George Cloutier. I'll just say it that way. Cloutier is the guy who did the front end. So you have two designers on this pen because Parker 51 forced their hand. All right. So let's see what I said. My next bullet point was talking about the design. I already kind of jumped it a little bit. It's very much Art Deco, which at the point of critique, I guess at the time and now looking back, they think was probably a little bit of a detriment for the pen because the pen did not do well. It only lasted a few years, and part of the concern, and we'll get into others, was that maybe the design was not as futuristic, as modern, as sleek as the other things that were happening. So Parker 51, what a leap in design. The Eversharp Skyline, great, weirdly futuristic, streamlined design, right? So this, to many people, probably almost felt a little bit too, I wouldn't say vintage, but like, man, you're still doing Art Deco? Move on, that kind of a thing. Even though I love it now, you know, in the 2020s, I love Art Deco and I love this kind of design. It appeals to me, but maybe with, you know, the fashion of the time and people looking to the next thing, it wasn't as ideal as some of the other pens. And what else did I see? So it came out, of course, and apparently I'll just make a quick digression that it came out. This is actually a secondary thought. It's like, yeah, let's go and do a fountain pen with something. This is the Fifth Avenue was Eversharp's name for their capillary action. The way you filled the writing mechanism of the ballpoint pen. And there's a whole history about this whole ballpoint pen fiasco. But their ballpoint pen was rolled out as the Fifth Avenue, and this fountain pen accompanied it as more like the second thought, the second line. I mean, this is, in their mind, a top-tier pen, but it was the partner of the primary focus, the ballpoint pen, which did not do well at all. This whole line apparently not great. It's kind of started to signal the end for the Eversharp company. And what else do I have? So when it came out to basically three sizes. There's a standard / men's, which is what this is, and it was about 5 1/4 inches. There is a lady, which is about 4 1/2 inches, and that is what this original guy is. This is the lady version. Cap off, definitely a step down in size, but this is the lady version. And then there was the Stowaway. This is their version of the Schaefer Tuckaway, and this was only about just over 4 inches, 4 1/32 inches. So this is what they had. And let's go ahead and talk about the colors they had. And so they had jet black, navy blue, which I'd like to see that, but I've heard it does darken over time, so getting into the same situation as these are the Dubonnet reds. This one and that short one I had, so these are the reds, and the other pen I've shown in this video is the jet black. And then we have, of course, the maybe not of course, but we have marine green, and the real of course is the army brown, trying to make them for, you know, service members. So you gotta always have that brown to match the battle dress uniforms of the military. And then there's a silver gray and also a pearl gray, and this one was only for the stowaway. So you had some options. Of course, this is the era of polystyrene plastics and injection molded, so you really just had straight colors. You didn't have any of the designs anymore. And so what else we got? We got a little bit of a thing going on there, a little drip. Came from somewhere. What else? So what did people think about this when it came out? You know, it's Eversharp. It's like, cool, I love Eversharp, so let's go ahead and get this new one. But what they found was these were some hard riders. Having to fit that nib onto a feed into this hood kind of took away a lot of the flexibility that people liked, the little bounciness, the funness of a good Eversharp nib. So they were thought to be hard riders. And so when they found that, they kind of changed the design to kind of decrease the section, not the section, but make a smaller feed, and added that hard rubber collar that I pointed out to kind of grip it in a very controlled fashion, leave as much nib as they could to kind of make it a little bit more bouncy. And even though this one has that hard rubber, this one does feel this is rather manifold. This is pretty fine, extra fine, and just a nail. This one feels like a nail. What else? I think people were a little bit unhappy about the sticker price, because even this little one that I showed before that has a sticker on it, $12.50 for this little lady's pen. And you know, you're paying $12.50, maybe $15 for the standard, to stay with a lever filler, something that's not as fun to write with, and it's not as new, modern, or futuristic. So it seems a bit of a stretch to expect people to pay that much for this simple of a pen. What else do we have? I did that. And that's about it. And then we kind of talk about the like the modern issues that people have with it, just because it is polystyrene. The particular formula, I guess, that Eversharp was working with, that over time there is hood shrinkage and overall some discoloration over time. And I've seen some of the lighter ones, I've seen some browns come through, and they definitely, those sheaths, those hoods, they definitely get stained up and discolored over time. So I have definitely seen that. And what else? Blah blah blah. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think it's just a little too late. Nice design, a little cop out on the hood just to kind of meet the market, but the hood didn't add anything to the pen. In fact, if anything, squeezing things into the space seemed to take away from it. So it did not last long at all. In about 1947 is when it was called quits. And Skylines were still being sold right alongside of it, so an older pen was still kind of being sold. And this had a good, 4-ish years, but it kind of, it fell. And what else? Let me go ahead and show you another color before I really get into the, no, let me just do the writing sample. I mean, you've been seeing the writing. Let me just kind of critique it actively. So if I do the sentence, boom. It's definitely extra fine to fine. It is a little bit into the paper at times. So you kind of have to be a little bit more careful about how you're holding it. If you roll, actually, this is me more on the side. This is me more straight up and down. This is me on the other side. Lost it. For some reason, that's writing. Maybe the tips are a little bit different. You see that under the loop. But anyway, so you kind of have to be particular about how you write, just like with the Parker 51. So you're a little bit limited on the dynamics of the nib. This particular one it's a nail, and it doesn't, I'm pushing hard, and it doesn't really even open up. So this is a manifold nib for sure. It definitely doesn't have the playfulness of, other Eversharp nibs, the Skyline or anything like that. But, I mean, as just a matter-of-fact writer, it's not bad. Like, if I don't care, I mean, if I'm in the 1940s, 50s, I'm working on my papers and I have some carbon copy paper, I mean, this is going to do the job. Because I think even the Parker 51 and such, they were going towards that kind of type of nib anyway, for that very reason. So functionally, I think it's a good nib. Is it fun? Meh. But, you choose the pen for the job you want it to do. So if you don't mind a nice, firm, fine nib for a little bit, it's going to be just fine. So I'm not really going to fault it on that. The size, I love the size. This is definitely a good pen, and I believe that 5 and whatever is probably capped. And do I have... It is not handy, unfortunately. I do not have my ruler handy, but I mean, it fits well in my hand. I can zoom out now, I guess. I mean, it's definitely a good size. I can not even be on the hood and still be on the pen. So to hold it up here, I can be very relaxed with this pen. It's not super tiny, it's not super chunky, so it's kind of like a right in the middle kind of size pen. I guess it is pointed out that you can orient this pen pretty quickly. But there's my hood, there are the angles. Even if you feel them, like, okay, you can do it blindfolded, right? That being said, the area I would probably hold this pen, if I'm going to try to hold it up on the shell, the hood, I've got a fairly narrow area. Zoom in just a bit since I'm pointing now. Fairly narrow area right there until I'm on these little angled sections. So not a lot. This would feel like a small section. And if I'm even behind it, I'm starting to feel this. And this actually I do feel. I'm not a big fan of it. So if I were, I'd either just make do up here or maybe even come back a little bit, because it is definitely a big enough pen to do that. And if I'm going to do that, let me take a peek at this ladies version. So probably about the same. It feels about the same kind. And if I were to post it, because these do post, does that help me come back? This helps create that link for the lady, to kind of come back and have a little bit more relaxed and figure out ways to not be on that catch ring. Because I do feel that might be an issue with this one over time, even though I have used Eversharps several times, or Fifth Avenue several times. I don't think it was anything that made me not want to keep using it or put it down, but you do have to be a little bit more finite in particular about where you put your hands, your fingers. What else? This is a nitpicky thing for me just because I gripe about it a bunch. The fact that these were actually designed to have the lever at the base, I don't like it. It still bothers me a little bit. And it's not even at the base, right? It's a little bit off. Like it's on the belly side, but it's not happily lined up with the nib. It's just kind of off to the side. And I don't know why they chose to do that, what that means. Why not just put it there? I don't know, dude. But they did. So that's just more an aesthetic. I can't really take that away from the functionality of the pen. And if I were to say anything about this, it does take a good bit of force. You can't just kind of have to really force that on. So maybe not the best clutch design, but it's definitely solid. That is not going to fall off or go anywhere. What else? I feel like I'm starting to crap on this pen, even though I love it so much. I need to stop while I'm ahead. I feel like I might need to take a shim in this just to see. I mean, this is a fairly fine tip, so maybe this is actually what my line is supposed to be like. But it is kind of writing. And this is a Pelican. It's not a super wet or dry ink, but this is definitely on the super fine side and definitely on the drier side. So maybe it would be better to play around with a slightly wetter ink with this particular nib. And although the last pen I used, the last the last Fifth Avenue I used was actually fairly easy. I don't think it was as dry as this one. So I guess that speaks to some of the variability in some of these pens. But what would I say overall? I mean, I like it. I like Art Deco. I like the aesthetics. And I like that it's a little bit different for the time when everything else went almost on the nose, Parker 51. This went a little bit off to the side, even though it's probably because this was the pen they had in mind, but then they had to slap a hood on it. So that's why it's so different. But I still like the aesthetic. I still like the design. I like the size of this. There are some that have a little bit more fun writing, a little smoother, a little more fun, so it is out there to find. They are a nice example of a classic brand, kind of like their last high point or their waning point. And so you can get these actually pretty darn cheap. I mean, if you like Eversharp Skylines, those can have a wide variety. Depending on the quality, you can get them for 20, 30 bucks. You can get them 70 to 100, maybe a little bit more, depending on the particular model. But these, because they're not super well known or people don't really write with them or care much about them, even though they're nice pens, well-made pens, they tend to go for the 20, 30, 40, $50 range. And so you can probably pick up some of these at a good price. You can collect some of the colors and varieties and sizes and have a little bit of fun with them and maybe get a little bit of love for them. And that in itself might make it like just for the collector to say, I have an Eversharp Fifth Avenue and I have X, Y, and Z of it and I got them for cheap. Even though a lot of vintage pens now are getting stupidly expensive. So I would recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend it as a starter pen. I can definitely say that. And since I have them off to the side, let me go ahead and just show a couple of the other varieties that I have. So we've shown this one, the one that with the nib unit that came out quite nicely. Oh, threaded on crooked, and I was like, what's going on? Or maybe the cap ring. Oh, the cat ring's a little bit crooked on this one. Yeah, I need to, that's better. Okay, so there's the jet black. I don't know, maybe you can see a little bit of difference. Yeah, I can see it now, but a little bit of difference, red, black. And then the only other color I have is this pen and pencil set, and this is probably the one I used last. But this is the Army Brown, standard of course, and this one, I don't know if you can see it, but This one has a little bit of a bounce to the nib. This was the one I think I just liked this one. It was really fun to write with, and I took a little trip and wrote some letters with this one, or journaled around with it, but this was fun to write with. And does this, yeah, again, always here at the bottom, that bottom left, I guess, where that lever is. And this is what the pencil would look like, the same kind of a deal, just kind of copying the cap with the button, and very quietly ejects that lead. And actually don't think, no eraser with these. It's really just pencil lead. Don't make a mistake, because you can't erase it. And I think those are the ones I have. Yeah, I don't think I have any other funky colors. I'd like to get a navy blue. That'd be nice, actually. Or the green would be surprising. But let me go ahead and take these aside and leave this here. Flip the paper. And I know my explanation of this one's running stupidly long now, but I don't know. Apparently I had more to say than I thought. But I still love this pen, even though you can nitpick about it and critique it. I still love these, worth collecting. And I'll go ahead and show you the pens I'm going to try to do next time. Actually, are they both? Yeah, they both are. So finally, long last, we're going to come to the taper right. This is a classic example of this large semi-hooded nib. That should be fun to see how it writes. And here's one I think I showed at the same time, just basically same concept of the barrel and body, but there's so much variation that there are so many types of taper rights that it's almost ridiculous and not even intuitive that some taper rights are taper rights, because they don't always conform to this hooded thing. But anyway, so we'll talk about some taper rights next time, and I'll leave this in front and say thank you and sorry for the long video, but I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit about the Fifth Avenue. So don't buy them all up, leave a few for me, and I'll talk to you next time.